When the blizzard descends, the world is reduced to wind and ice. For us, survival is a matter of technology. But for the first peoples of this continent, survival was an art. They possessed a knowledge of the natural world so profound it allowed them to sleep warm through nights that would kill a modern person in hours. And the key was a hidden trick buried right beneath their feet. Part 1. The Great White Enemy. The North American Winter. It is not a gentle season. It is an adversary, a relentless elemental force of physics that drains the world of heat. From the Arctic tundra to the high plains of the Lakota and the dense, snow-choked forests of the Anishinaabe winter was and is the great filter. To be exposed to this is to understand true vulnerability. The human body is a fragile furnace engineered for the warm savannas of our ancestors. We are by design tropical creatures. Our bodies maintain a precise internal temperature of 98, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, or 37 degrees Celsius. When the ambient temperature plummets, that furnace must work overtime. The air a sub-zero expanse begins to steal this heat. It pulls it from the skin through convection as the wind strips away our warm boundary layer. It leaches it from our feet through conduction as the frozen ground acts like a thermal sink. Our bodies fight back. The first defense is vasoconstriction, blood vessels in the skin and extremities. The fingers, toes, nose and ears clamp shut, pulling warm blood back to the vital organs. This is a triage. The body is willing to sacrifice a finger to save the heart. The next defense is shivering. This is an involuntary, spastic contraction of muscles, a desperate attempt to generate heat through friction and movement. But this burns precious calories, the very fuel for the furnace. If these defenses fail, hypothermia begins. The core temperature drops. At 95 degrees, shivering becomes uncontrollable. At 91 degrees, the shivering stops. The mind, starved of warmth and oxygen, becomes confused. This is the insidious stage. People become lethargic, paradoxically feeling warm sometimes, even shedding their clothes in a final fatal delirium. Below 82 degrees, Fahrenheit cardiac arrest is almost certain. This is the enemy. Not a predator with claws and fangs, but a cold, indifferent universe. To survive a single night in a blizzard is a challenge. To live for months in this environment, to thrive, to raise children, and build a culture that requires more than endurance. It requires genius. Part 2. The settlers' struggle. When European settlers first pushed west, they brought with them the technology of the Old World. They built log cabins, symbols of permanence and defense, but they were often building with a flawed understanding of this new, harsher climate. Their homes were drafty. The logs, often poorly chinked with mud and grass, allowed the wind to slice through. Their greatest weapon against the cold was the magnificent European-style fireplace. But this technology was incredibly inefficient. A large open hearth is a master of convection. It sucks enormous volumes of air from the room to feed its flames, and then shoots that air and most of its heat, up to 90% of it, straight up the chimney. This creates a powerful vacuum effect, pulling frigid, sub-zero air in through every crack and gap in the walls. We have countless journal entries from the 17th and 18th centuries. They're astonishing. People writing about ink freezing in the well inside the cabin, of waking up with their blankets frozen solid to the wall. They would roast on one side by the fire and freeze on the other. They were consuming massive, unsustainable amounts of wood, working constantly to feed a fire that was in effect making their cabins colder. The stories of settlers freezing to death, often just yards from their homes, are legion. The Donner Party trapped in the Sierra Nevada were not defeated by starvation alone. They were defeated by cold. Their crude shelters and inability to manage the deep insulating snowpack sealed their fate. They saw the wilderness as something to be conquered, to be walled off. They had not yet learned what the indigenous inhabitants had known for millennia. You do not fight the winter. You partner with it. You use its own properties against it. Part 3. The indigenous context. There is no single Native American. The continent was and is home to thousands of distinct cultures, each with a unique and sophisticated adaptation to their specific landscape. The knowledge of the Inuit masters of the Arctic ice was different from that of the Haudenosaunee of the eastern woodlands, but a common thread unites them, a philosophy of deep observation, a relationship with the land built over thousands of years passed down through oral tradition. This was not trial and error. It was a living, breathing science. We are taught to listen. The land tells you everything you need to know. The way the snow drifts, which trees hold the snow, which ones shed it. The sound a tree makes when it is frozen solid. The way the mouse builds its nest. All of these are lessons. Survival wasn't a trick. It was a way of living. It was about understanding the spirit and the behavior of the wind, the snow, the stone, and the fire. For the Plains tribes, winter meant following the bison, their source of food, shelter, and fuel. For the subarctic Dane, it meant small mobile family groups tracking moose and caribou through a world of endless forest and frozen muskeg. For the Mandan and Hidatsa of the Missouri River, it meant retreating into their massive semi-subterranean earth lodges, marvels of thermal engineering. They all faced the same enemy, the relentless killing cold of the night, and they all in their own ways converged on a set of solutions that were elegant, sustainable, and built from the materials at hand. They understood the physics of heat transfer, conduction, convection, and radiation on a level that modern science would only codify centuries later. Their solution was a system, a three-part system, a shelter that managed the cold bedding that defeated it, and a secret source of heat that provided warmth all night long without smoke and with minimal fuel. This system is what allowed them to sleep warm, while others with seemingly superior technology froze. Part 4. The foundation, shelter. The first part of the system is the most obvious shelter. But indigenous shelters were not crude huts. They were precision-engineered microclimates, each a masterclass in insulation. And the first lesson they mastered was one that seems contradictory. Snow is your friend. Snow itself is one of the world's best insulators. Why? Because it's mostly trapped air. Freshly fallen powder snow is over 90% air. When snow compacts, it still holds millions of tiny air pockets. This trapped, unmoving air is what stops heat transfer. The Inuit are famous for the igloo built of cut blocks. But many other groups from the subarctic to the mountains used a simpler method, the quinsy or the snow trench. A quinsy, a dome hollowed out from a large pile of snow, is a thermal miracle. The body heat of just 1 or 2 people can raise the internal temperature from 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside to 30 or 40 degrees inside, a 70-degree difference. The structure traps the body's own radiant heat. But for those in the woodlands like the Anishinaabe, the shelter was the wigwam. This dome-shaped structure seems flimsy, but it is a complex layered system. The frame of bent saplings is covered in overlapping mats or sheets of bark. But the key is the layers. Often an inner layer of woven cattail mats would be hung, and the space between the mats and the outer bark wall would be filled with dried leaves, moss or grasses. This created a thick, insulated wall the same principle as modern fiberglass insulation. The dome shape was also deliberate. It shed snow, preventing a roof collapse, and it minimized the surface area exposed to the wind. Most importantly, it created a smaller, curved interior space that was easier to heat. Hot air from a small fire would rise, hit the curved ceiling, and be forced to circulate back down the walls, warming the entire living space, unlike the square cabins of the settlers, where heat simply collected uselessly at the high ceiling. On the plains, the tipi is an icon. Many mistakenly believe it to be a flimsy tent, brutal in winter. They are wrong. The tipi was a thermal marvel, a convection engine designed for the specific conditions of the windswept prairies. The genius is in the two-layer system. A tipi wasn't just one cone of hides. There was an inner lining, often made of painted dew cloth, that stopped about 6 feet off the ground. This lining created a chimney effect. Cold air from the outside would sneak under the outer cover, hit this lining, and be funneled upwards between the two layers, feeding the fire with oxygen and drawing smoke straight up and out the smoke hole. This meant the people sitting inside were protected from all drafts. The smoke was drawn out perfectly, and the fire itself created a constant, gentle circulation of warm air inside the living space. It was brilliant. You could be in a tipi in a 20-below blizzard with a small armful of sticks fire and be perfectly comfortable. Perhaps the most robust shelters of all were the earth lodges of the Mandan Hidatsa and Arikara peoples. These were massive semi-subterranean structures home to multiple families. They would dig down several feet, then erect a huge heavy timber frame. This frame was then covered in layers of willow-thick prairie grass, and finally, a dense, thick layer of packed earth and sod often several feet thick. The earth itself provided an incredible thermal mass. It acted like a cave. In the summer it stayed cool. In the winter, the temperature inside would rarely drop below freezing, even with no fire. The ground's geothermal heat, a constant 50 or so degrees, would radiate into the structure. A long, baffled entryway tunnel acted as an airlock, preventing cold winds from blowing directly inside. A single fire in the central hearth could keep this massive space warm for 40 or 50 people. In all these designs, from the snow dome to the earth lodge, the principle was the same: stop the wind, trap the air, and use the earth and snow as allies, not enemies. Part 5. The insulating layer. Bedding. A perfect shelter is useless if you lose all your heat to the ground. The second part of the system was the bed, and the most important rule of winter survival, a rule indigenous peoples knew intimately, is this: insulate from the ground first. The frozen earth is a relentless thief of heat. It will suck warmth from your body through conduction far faster than the air. A person sleeping directly on the snow or frozen ground, even in the best sleeping bag, will be dangerously cold. The first layer of the bed was never the sleeping robe. It was the mattress. But this was a mattress designed for insulation. A thick-sprung bed of pine or fir boughs was a common base. The springy air-filled branches created a dead air space, several inches thick, lifting the sleeper off the cold ground. On top of this, or instead of it, were the mats. These were not decorations. They were high technology, woven from materials like cattails rushes or shredded cedar bark. These mats were dense and filled with trapped air. A cattail mat is functionally a natural bubble wrap and is remarkably warm to the touch. A single mat is good, but they would layer them, 2, 3, 4 mats deep. By the time you had this platform of boughs and mats, you were functionally separated from the ground. You were no longer sleeping on the earth. You were sleeping on a cushion of air. Only after this platform was built would the blankets be added. And these blankets were the furs and hides of the animals that shared their world. The king of all robes was the bison hide. A prime winter bison hide is an insulating marvel. It has 2 layers long coarse guard hairs that shed snow and block wind, and an incredibly dense, soft underfur that traps body heat. A family sleeping together under a single massive bison robe would share their body heat, creating a warm microclimate that could defy the coldest night. Other furs were used based on region bare incredibly warm deer elk or robes woven from rabbit skins. The principle was the same, the hollow fibers of the fur trap air, and that trapped air is what keeps you warm. This 3-part bed, the boughs, the mats, and the robes was a complete system. It solved the problem of conductive heat loss, but the shelter and the bedding, as perfect as they were defensive. They trapped heat. How did they generate heat to turn a cold shelter into a warm home? The fire was one answer, but fire is hungry, smoky, and dangerous. It needs constant tending. You can't sleep soundly while managing a fire. They needed a source of heat that was safe, long-lasting, and required no fuel during the night. They needed a battery, and they found one in the oldest and most common material on Earth. Part 6. The trick. Revealed. The thermal battery. This is the hidden trick, the centerpiece of the system. It is so simple, so elegant, it's often overlooked. It's a hot rock. This is not magic. It is pure physics. Different materials absorb and release heat at different rates. This property is called specific heat capacity, or thermal mass. Wood has a low thermal mass. It heats up fast and it cools down fast. Water has a very high thermal mass, but rock, especially dense, non-porous rock like basalt granite or soapstone, has a fantastic thermal mass. It acts like a thermal battery. It can soak up a tremendous amount of heat energy from a fire and then crucially release that heat slowly over a period of many hours. The knowledge began with which rocks to choose. This was a life or death decision. A porous rock like sandstone or any rock pulled from a riverbed is filled with trapped moisture. When heated, that moisture turns to steam. The steam expands and the rock explodes like a hand grenade. Indigenous peoples knew their geology. They chose the right stones, dense, dry, fire-tested rocks that had been collected and cured. Soapstone was especially prized. It's soft, easy to carve, and has one of the highest thermal masses of any common stone. It's a perfect natural radiator. The process was a nightly ritual in cold weather. As the evening fire burned down, the heating stones, often the size of a fist or a small loaf of bread, would be left in the glowing coals to soak for an hour or more until they were intensely hot. Then came the trick of applying this heat. There were 3 primary methods. Method 1. The bed warmer. This was the most direct method. The superheated stone was wrapped in a thick insulating layer, a bundle. This might be buckskin, a piece of old robe, or even fresh-peeled green bark. This bundle was now a portable, smokeless, long-lasting heater. It was, in effect, the world's first hot water bottle, but far more potent. This bundle would be placed at the bottom of the sleeping robes. It would preheat the entire bed, turning a cold, sleeping space into a warm, inviting nest. A sleeper could place it at their feet, which are the first to get cold. They could hold it against their chest. The stone would radiate a deep, penetrating, infrared heat, warming the body to its core. A single well-heated stone could continue to release palpable warmth for 6, 7, even 8 hours the entire night. The beauty of this is its efficiency. You're taking all that waste heat from your cooking fire heat that would normally just radiate into the sky, and you're storing it. You're carrying it with you into your insulated bed inside your insulated shelter. You are layering efficiencies. A family might have several stones, one for each child, one for the parents. No smoke, no risk of sparks, just clean, safe, radiant heat. Method 2. The heated floor. This method was even more sophisticated. It was common in pit houses, earth lodges, or any shelter with a non-flammable earth floor. Instead of bringing the stones into the bed, they were placed under it. A shallow pit was dug where the family would sleep. The hot stones were pulled from the fire and placed in the bottom of this pit. They were then covered with a thin layer of sand or soil. This created a sub-floor, radiant heating system. The soil layer diffused the heat so it wasn't dangerously hot in one spot. Instead, a large area of the bed was gently, constantly warmed from below. This was perhaps the ultimate in winter comfort. The sleepers were sandwiched by insulation. The robes above trapped their body heat, while the insulated mats below trapped the radiant heat from the stones. The cold, heat-sucking ground was completely neutralized, replaced by a source of active warmth. This is a level of comfort that few modern campers with all their high-tech pads ever experience. Method 3. The lodge heater. The third method was for heating the entire shelter. Instead of a small open fire that needed constant feeding, larger stones were heated in a main fire. When the fire was banked for the night, covered in ash to smolder and preserve the coals, these massive radiator stones would be left in the hearth. They would continue to radiate heat into the entire lodge for hours. This was especially effective in the earth lodges. The stone radiated heat which warmed the air. The heavy earth walls and roof trapped that heat. This system solved the most dangerous problem of a winter fire: carbon monoxide. An open fire in a tightly sealed shelter is a deadly risk. But with the hot stone method, the fire could be allowed to die down to a bed of embers, eliminating the smoke and the risk while the heat battery of the stones did all the work. This was the hidden trick. A simple rock transformed by fire and knowledge into a sophisticated tool for survival. It was a smokeless furnace, a portable radiator, and a key to sleeping warm through the longest, darkest, and coldest of nights. Part 7. Beyond the stone. Other tricks. The hot stone was a central piece of technology, but it was part of a holistic philosophy of warmth. This knowledge extended to every aspect of life. It started with fuel. The human body is the primary furnace, and that furnace needs fuel. Indigenous winter diets were, by necessity, incredibly high in calories, and especially in fat. We think of fat as an enemy today. For indigenous peoples in winter, fat was the ultimate survival food. Carbohydrates burn hot and fast. Protein is hard to digest. But fat is slow-burning, high-octane fuel. A food like pemmican, a mixture of dried, pounded meat, rendered fat, and sometimes berries, is one of the most calorically dense and stable foods on the planet. This wasn't just food. This was internal fuel. Eating a high-fat meal before sleep meant your body's furnace would be burning slow and steady all night long, generating internal heat to complement the external heat of the stones and the insulation of the robes. Another trick was community. We are warm-blooded animals. In the West, we cherish the idea of the individual bed. This is a recipe for freezing. Indigenous families slept together. Children between parents, and elders and dogs, all sharing one large sleeping platform under one set of robes. This huddling minimizes the surface area exposed to the cold and maximizes the shared body heat. A single person might shiver. 5 people under a bison robe with a hot stone at their feet create a thermal mass of their own. Even their firecraft was based on efficiency. The settlers' log cabin fire with logs parallel is built for show. It burns fast hot and wastes fuel. Many indigenous groups used a star fire. Long logs were arranged like the spokes of a wheel with their ends meeting in the middle. This created a small, hot, easily controlled fire. As the ends of the logs burned, they were simply pushed further into the center. This method used a fraction of the wood. It could be tended for an entire night with minimal effort. It was a low and slow fire, perfect for heating stones, and providing a steady source of heat rather than a roaring, wasteful blaze. Food community firecraft, shelter bedding, and the hot stone. It was never one trick. It was a symphony of knowledge, every piece working in harmony. Part 8. The Science. Explained. Let's break this down. The indigenous winter system was a complete intuitive mastery of the 3 forms of heat transfer. First, conduction. Heat transfer through direct contact. The problem. The frozen ground. It's a massive heat sink that will pull warmth from your body relentlessly. The settler's failure. A thin blanket or a cot on a drafty floor. The cold ground or the cold air under the cot wins. The indigenous solution. The sleeping platform. A thick base of springy pine boughs created a dead air space. Air is a poor conductor. On top of that, woven cattail mats, which are also filled with air. This multi-layered system stopped conduction. You weren't touching the ground. You were touching a cushion of air. Second, convection. Heat transfer through the movement of a fluid like air. The problem. The wind. Cold, moving air steals heat 25 times faster than still air. The settler's failure. The drafty cabin. The open fireplace that creates a massive convective current, pulling cold air in. The indigenous solution. The dome-shaped layered wigwam, which minimized wind exposure and circulated heat down, or the tipi's chimney lining, which controlled the convective current, turning it into an engine for ventilation, keeping the living space draft-free. The earth lodge with its airlock tunnel stopped the wind completely. Third, radiation. Heat transfer through electromagnetic waves, like the heat you feel from the sun or a fire. The problems. Your body is always radiating its heat away into the cold environment. The settler's failure. A thin wool blanket. It slows conduction a little, but does little to stop radiant heat loss. The indigenous solution. A multi-part answer. 1. Reflect it. The thick underfur of a bison robe or bearskin doesn't just trap air, it traps and reflects your body's own infrared heat back at you. 2. Fight it with a better source. This is the genius of the hot stone. The stone becomes a more powerful radiator than your body. It radiates its stored long-wave infrared heat into you and your bedding. This is the system. 1. Stop conduction with an insulated bed. 2. Stop convection with a smart aerodynamic shelter. 3. Win the radiation battle with reflective furs and an active heat source, the thermal battery of the hot stone. It is a perfect closed-loop system of thermal management developed thousands of years before the laws of thermodynamics were ever written down. Part 9. Lost Knowledge and Modern Revival. This profound life-saving knowledge was not written in books. It was carried in language, in story, in ritual, and in practice. And for a time, it was almost destroyed. With the forced relocation to reservations, the move from traditional shelters to government-issued drafty shacks, and the devastating impact of residential schools which punished children for speaking their language or practicing their culture. These skills were deliberately severed from new generations. A people who had mastered the art of living with the land were suddenly forced to live in poverty, disconnected from the very sources of their strength and resilience. The trick of the hot stone, the knowledge of the tipis lining the art of weaving a rush mat, this was dismissed as primitive and replaced with inefficient, inferior technologies. But this knowledge was not lost. It was only sleeping. Today there is a powerful revival. All across the continent, indigenous knowledge keepers, elders and youth are working to reclaim and revitalize these skills. They are not survival skills. They are life skills. They are a core part of their identity. In the modern survival community, we've spent decades inventing things that indigenous peoples perfected millennia ago. My high-tech $500 sleeping bag is just an attempt to recreate the properties of a bison robe. My mylar space blanket is a cheap imitation of what those furs did, reflecting radiant heat. We're finally starting to look back at this traditional ecological knowledge not as a historical curiosity, but as a body of master-level science that we have everything to learn from. And this, the hot stone, this is the game changer. I teach this in every winter course. People are shocked. They're used to shivering all night. You give them one of these properly wrapped, and they sleep like a baby. It's simple, it's sustainable, and it works better than most of our modern gadgets. It's just genius. This reclamation is more than just about staying warm. It is about healing. It is about reconnecting with the land, with ancestors, and with a philosophy of sustainable, respectful living. It is a powerful statement that this knowledge is not primitive. It is timeless. Part 10, Final Reflection. The world of the North American winter is one of profound beauty and profound danger. For millennia, the first peoples navigated this world, not with brute force, but with observation, with humility, and with a quiet, powerful intelligence. The hidden trick was never just a trick. It was a single, elegant note in a complex song of survival. It was the understanding that a shelter should breathe like a lung, that a bed should be a nest built from the insulating gifts of the earth, and that a simple stone, a piece of the earth itself, could be charged with the life of the fire and carry that warmth through the darkest, coldest night. It is a lesson in resilience, a lesson in the power of small, efficient solutions, and a testament to a deep scientific understanding of the natural world that we are only just beginning to appreciate. It reminds us that the answers to our greatest challenges are often not found in complex new technologies, but in the timeless wisdom of those who learned to listen to the land and to live in balance with it. This knowledge is a vital part of our human story. If you were fascinated by the science and resilience of these incredible survival systems, please help us share these stories. Like this video to support our research, share it with someone who would appreciate this lost wisdom, and subscribe for more documentaries on the incredible hidden histories that shape our world. Click the notification bell so you never miss an exploration into the past. What other hidden knowledge should we uncover next? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching,